In the 12th chapter of Luke, Luke writes these words. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich towards God." Back up. He said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, they neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life? If then you are not able to do so small a thing as that, why do you worry about the rest?" This portion of Scripture begins with a younger brother saying to Jesus, "Make my brother share the family inheritance with me." Which the first time I read it made perfect sense, because my mom used to beat us into sharing stuff whether we wanted to or not. You know. Of course you could cut a piece of cake, one for you and your sister, and I would do that, and she would inevitably say, "Now your sister gets to pick which one she wants." Okay? Got to share and share alike kind of thing. That's what we're accustomed to, but that is not Jesus' response. He doesn't talk about fairness. He doesn't talk about sharing. What he talks about to this younger brother is not to be greedy. Maybe if we understood the custom of the day, it might make a little bit better sense to us. In Jesus' day, and throughout all the history of Israel, the inheritance only went to the oldest son. Nobody else inherited anything. The oldest son got 100% of everything that Dad had. Back when the land was first given by God to the people, and the people of Israel sat down with the 12 tribes and divided up. The half tribe of Manasseh gets this, and the tribe of Dan gets that, and the tribe of this, and all the land is divided up. They did include some very peculiar laws. And the sole purpose of those laws was to make sure that the land stayed in the possession of the family. It doesn't take very difficult math to figure out that a couple of generations down the road, if you have 2 or 3 sons, pretty soon what had been a nice piece of property slowly gets whittled down. And instead of having a nice piece of property to take care of the family, every brother, every grandson, every great-grandson has a smaller and smaller and smaller piece of property on which to try and eke out a living. Think about it. How could you provide for a family on the size of piece of property that you have now? We just don't live on property large enough for that. By keeping property in great big chunks and by allowing the head of a family, a whole family, to oversee that, they could provide for their needs for the entire family. The goal, the purpose was to maintain family unit, not to provide profits for an individual. They understood the survival of the entire family was far more significant than the needs or the desires of one particular person. When the man asked Jesus to have his brother divide the inheritance with him, he's acting greedily. He wants to put his interest above the interest of his family. Having said that, then Jesus turns around and tells them a parable about a rich man who has all kinds of crops. And the crops this year are particularly abundant, so much so that he's not going to be able to store them. He's going to have to tear down barns and build new ones. And if he does that, he will really store enough that he will have adequate finances that he doesn't have to worry about the rest of his life. He will have provided enough for he and his family for as long as he'll be around. He can sit back and he can relax and he can enjoy himself. Money will never be an object for him. He will be free of any concern about tomorrow. By building bigger barns and holding the grains, his financial worries will be a thing of yesterday. And then Jesus tells an interesting story about not wanting us not to worry. Therefore I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you eat or drink, or your body, what you wear. Life is more than food, and body is more than clothes. And consider the birds of the air, how much value they are that God feeds them. And if we can't, by worrying, add a single hour to our lifespan, then we shouldn't bother to do that at all. It seems to me that Jesus is wanting exactly what the rich man wanted, to be worry-free. Have enough that he has what he needs for now and forever. To be free from anxiety or concern about tomorrow. It's what Jesus is talking about. The problem is the young man wanted to do that by taking from the family at the family's expense. By taking care of himself so the family wouldn't be necessarily able to take care of themselves. The rich man figured he had enough that he didn't need anything else. He didn't need anybody else's help. He had provided for all that might happen in his future. Jesus' desire is for us to become anxious-free, and yet, not because we provide, but because we learn from the ravens, who neither have barns nor wealth. They're simply birds. They don't accumulate. They don't stockpile anything. And yet every single day God provides what they need. Quite literally, they just fly through life, enjoying every day that God gives to them. Every single opportunity they have, they rely entirely upon God to supply their needs. They don't plan anything. They don't store anything. And God provides for them. Surely, says Jesus, that you understand that you are more significant to God than birds are. Worry about tomorrow. Fear that drives me to ignore what God does for me, that forces me to find ways to rely upon myself to get enough for what I need. It's not part of God's plans for us. We're intended to remain as worry-free as birds are. Every day receiving what God gives to us. Have you ever noticed that we're not running short on birds? Have you ever noticed that? God manages to take care of the birds. Worry for me has become really more of a stewardship issue. Now, I know when I mention the word stewardship, what comes to mind is offerings that we do, each week, that we're talking about money. But when I understood what stewardship meant, for me it means everything that I have ownership of, everything that I have responsibility for. Worry creates a drain on me. It drains my mental resources. It focuses my mind on on one particular thing or one set of circumstances rather than on God. When something takes my attention away from God and drains my energy, it's obvious that to me that my resources include my time and my energy, and if I worry, they're wasted. Good stewardship is about everything that God places in our hands. And the first thing He places in our hands are ourselves, our time, our energy, our thoughts. And if I'm not a good steward of those, it's unlikely I'll be a good steward of anything else. If worry causes me to be concerned about other things and lose my perspective on the presence of God in my life, if it causes me to seek to solve my problems, to alleviate the difficulties, and all of this separated from God, then I have become like the foolish rich man. I take control of my situation and I remove God from my needs and my wants. Greed, worry, looking after me instead of watching God. These are the things that take us away from the presence of God. Good stewards use everything at their disposal. Every event, every item that happens, every bit of themselves in order to keep their lives moving toward a closer and closer relationship with God. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to have some folks come up and we're going to renew some wedding vows. I want to tell you just a little bit about that. Today, we're going to renew wedding vows for people whose total years marriage equal 562. Not individually, okay, but accumulated, okay? Didn't say we were just doing old folks, okay? 562 years of finding a way to be faithful to one another. Stewardship. It's about finding a way to be faithful with everything I possess in my relationship with God. Today, as we celebrate with a number of couples the milestones in their marriages years ago, some of them as few as 20, some well over 65 years, they face one another and they declare again their love for each other. Over time, they have had opportunities to be drawn away because we live in that kind of world. And yet they have chosen to do those things that have led them into better, loving relationships together. Maybe their stewardship of their love for one for another will help you and I remain faithful and loving as we look towards being good stewards of our relationship with God.